Will you be remembered after you're dead? The Z-List Dead List podcast about obscure people from history with me, Izzy Lawrence. Hello and welcome to the Z-List Dead List. I am Izzy Lawrence, and apologies once again for being irregular with my content put out. That just sounds... well, it sounds slightly biological. I was hoping to be releasing 2 Z-List Dead Lists a month, and that has not happened on a regular, predictable basis. However, I am here, and you are here, and it is beautiful. Listen to me speak in your ears. For those of you who are fans of me and my work, you can catch me on Making History, so do download episodes of their podcast. You can also catch me on the British Museum Membercast, and I really recommend that because you are a fan of history. I interviewed Julia Farley in the most recent episode of that, and we talked about Iron Age stuff, like how to make pots, and Pierce Brosnan. But the point is, it was good, and you should be listening to that. You can also listen to Seti Sopo, which is a podcast where me and my friend Simon try and work out the opposite of things which do not have a natural opposite, like the hokey cokey. But mainly, you should be listening to the Z-List Dead List and liking our Facebook page and joining in on things there, etc. And yes, I have been exceptionally busy. I've been doing my public speaker workshops up in Sheffield. I have also been writing. That's right, there's a book coming out in 2020 and I'm writing it right now. So if there isn't a book coming out in 2020, it's because right now I am not writing, and I have actually been doing quite a lot of jiu-jitsu. This is all down to the fact that Naomi Paxton did that episode with me about Edith Garrod, the jiu-jitsu suffragette, and now I'm obsessed. I just got my light blue belt, guys. I spent 4 hours on a Saturday being pummeled by 11 men, and it wasn't as sexy as you would hope. It was 50 shades of fuck nothing other than a blue belt. I got one. As you can tell from my swearing, this one is a bit of a saucy episode. Not overly, actually, but slightly. It is starring one of my favourite comedians, Mr. Mitch Benn. Now, I have been a fan of Mitch longer than he'd like me to say how old I was when I started being a fan of Mitch and when I first saw him, but we'll ignore time. He writes a lot of sci-fi, so we won't ignore time. He's brilliant. He has Patreon, I should mention that, patreon.com/Mitch Benn. And he is up in Edinburgh at the Fringe this summer with his show Doing It on Purpose. And you know him if you listen to the Now Show on Radio 4 and watched a bit of telly. Anyway, he's going to tell you about a bit of history that I knew nothing about, hence the name of the show. Sit back and enjoy from the BP Lecture Theatre in the British Museum. Here is Mitch Benn.
First of all, ladies and gentlemen, apologies for my somewhat unsteady gait. I ran the British 10K yesterday morning. Yes, I moved this around 10 kilometres worth of London at a jogging pace without stopping. And I'm now made of pain. Every inch of me hurts, okay? My joints feel like I smashed them with hammers. My muscles are like guitar strings, and my feet look and feel like I've been at them with a belt sander. But other than that, hello. Who have I got for you? Well, let's see. Somebody I thought would be quite interesting. Most of the characters who this show discusses, I had to listen to a few of them, by way of research. This podcast concerns itself mainly with people who have somehow fallen down the back of the sofa of history, people who have, been forgotten by history, either because they didn't make that much of an impact at the time or because the impact that they did make at the time has just generally been forgotten. This is not quite the case with my subject. He didn't fall out of history. He was removed. He was deliberately erased to the extent that you can only really come across him these days by accident. So, have we got that? Okay. Oh, Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like? Oh, Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like? The solutions to all of your problems, oh, Wilhelm has them. He says that all you need is a more powerful orgasm. The human race depends on its orgastic potency. So the harder you come, the better you'll be. Oh, Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like? Oh, Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? what do you like? He came up with a theory of everything on his own. He said the universe is bound by energy called orgone, which can not only cure cancer but end wars and change the weather. Suffice to say that by the end his shit was not together. Oh, Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like? Oh, Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like? That's what we're doing. So there you go. That's it. Aye, by all means. Yeah. Wilhelm Reich is... First of all, I'm going to say that I come very much to bury Wilhelm Reich, not to praise him, okay? I'm not here as an advocate of the ideas of Wilhelm Reich. Wilhelm Reich is, as far as I know, the only person working in any branch of science whose ideas have ever actually been officially declared wrong by the United States government. That's not normally how science works, you know. An idea gets proposed, it gets tested, it fails the test, it gets forgotten, it gets left behind. Nah, that's not how it works for Reich. They actually stand up and say, you're wrong! Shut up! Stop saying that! And possibly understandably so when I get around to explaining what his ideas actually were. And as such, like I say, he wasn't forgotten. He was removed. He was erased. He's probably one of the closest analogues we have in Western culture to those, early communist luminaries who were gradually purged and erased from history and airbrushed out of all the official photographs. To the extent that you have to kind of come across Wilhelm Reich by accident. I first encountered him, bizarrely, back at university. I was at Edinburgh University in the 1980s, and there was a play about Wilhelm Reich called Wilhelm Reich in Hell, written by Robert Anton Wilson. And we did a production of it in my university theatre. I have a feeling, I might be remembering this completely wrong because it was a very long time ago. I wasn't actually in it, but a bunch of friends of mine were. I think it might actually have been the very first production of that play, because I seem to recall that Robert Anton Wilson's nephew or something was at the university at the time, and I think we got first go at the play or something. But that was the first time I encountered him. But he does turn up fleetingly throughout popular culture. He's also the inspiration for one of the better pop hits of 1985. Of which more in due course. But broadly speaking, kind of difficult man to sum up. He's kind of the point at which where Sigmund Freud meets L. Ron Hubbard is probably the best way of describing it. Which is kind of unfair, actually, because I think we're in sufficiently enlightened company. We can all agree that L. Ron Hubbard was basically a fraud, was just an opportunistic chancer who probably developed an authentic messianic complex in due course when he realized it was easier to believe his own bullshit. I think Wilhelm Reich was genuinely sincere in most of the things he came out with. Probably horribly deluded a lot of the time, but genuinely sincere in his delusions. So basically, born in what is now Ukraine in, let's have a look at this. Yeah, you can feel free to look at Wikipedia because that's what I'm doing. Born in what is now Ukraine, Jewish family, decided to raise him and his brother not Jewish, not just, secular, not really, but the family was kind of in the closet about its Jewishness. So there's the first little chink in your psychological armor right there. As he became a young man, he developed an interest particularly. He was one of the earliest advocates of post-Freudian psychology, possibly because he found it utterly vindicating. Because Freud, as I'm sure you know, postulated the idea that the sex drive is what motivates pretty much everything that the human race does. That, everything is about, as Oscar Wilde said, everything is about sex except sex, which is about power. Or maybe that was Cersei Lannister, but somebody said it anyway. And certainly I think Reich would have found this very vindicating because certainly sex motivated everything he did. I mean, according to his own memoirs, he had his first sexual experience aged 4 with a maidservant who he slept in the same bed as. He said he used to wank off the horses on the family farm by the time he was about 10. He said he was having sex with all his servants by the time he was 11. He was going to brothels on a regular basis by the time he was 15. Now, his own daughter, when she came to write up her experiences with her father, she's fairly sure he was making all this up. And she thinks it might just be because he got molested when he was a child and he somehow kind of, transferred all this into these sort of stories of thrilling sexual exploits, which is altogether easier for him to process. And nobody's pointing the finger at anybody in particular, but suffice it to say his dad was not a nice man. When Reich was 12, he discovered that his live-in tutor was having an affair with his mother. And he couldn't stand the guilt of knowing this, so he blurted it to his father, whereupon his father beat his mother after death and she killed herself. Now, if Reich didn't exist, Freud would have had to invent him, wouldn't he? You can see you've got all the makings here of possibly a sexual mania operating at every single level. And certainly when, after he was in the First World War, he started to study the psychology of Freud, he embraced all these ideas that sex is the prime motivation, but he took them a lot further. And he started to work on the idea that the human race is not just motivated by the desire for sex, it's motivated by the desire for good sex, and possibly even the quest for perfect sex. And he had this idea that the orgasm with this is kind of purgative event, that it was sort of, that it was purging you of all your ills, both psychological and physical, and that if we could somehow achieve the perfect orgasm, that this would purge us of everything and we would be instantly cured of all our mental and physical ills. Although, as we said, if you did ever do that, then what you then produced would be the single most toxic substance ever known to man, wouldn't it? You couldn't just, wipe it off with a sock and throw it at the corner of the room, could you? You'd have to have some guy come in and seal this stuff in concrete. Careful with that, man! That's 40% resentment and 20% diabetes. You can probably only do it in laboratory conditions, and I've got to say, I don't think I would find that conducive to producing the perfect orgasm. But this is his idea, this idea of orgastic potency, and he wrote this idea up, and he worked with Freud, became a personal student of Freud, and presented Freud with this theory of orgastic potency as his 70th birthday present. Right, no, seriously, with this huge manuscript. Freud said, and I'm quoting, if translating from the German, bit thick, isn't it? Happy birthday, Sigmund! Oh, Christ, okay. And he waited eagerly for Freud's verdict on it, and Freud didn't come back to him for about 2 months and then wrote this rather perfunctory letter. So, yeah, you think you're onto something, but you may be going a bit nuts. At which point he was like, well, fuck you then! And that was the end between Reich and Freud, and they never really got on. And spent most of the 90s and 20s and 30s being pursued from one European country to another, generally having whatever medical license he had revoked or coming embroiled in some kind of scandal. Like I say, I'm not here to defend the man. He had 4 wives, and at least 3 of them were patients that he had affairs with. I'm not sure what lines of professional conduct really existed in the early days of psychotherapy, but whatever lines there were, he was ignoring them. Kind of quite a bad reputation on that kind of level. Finally rocked up in America just as the war was breaking out, was immediately arrested and interned by the FBI as a foreign agent. And locked up on Ellis Island, the famous immigration processing center, locked in the same cell as a bunch of American Nazi sympathizers who he lived in constant fear of, wondering whether they were going to beat the crap out of him when they discovered he was a communist and or possibly Jewish. That was the other thing. Before the war, he actually turned up in the Soviet Union at one point because he wanted to try and come up with some kind of unified theory of Freudianism and Marxism. Thought it was all part of the same thing. And that's probably the sound of the first marble rolling away, isn't it? It's when you think, not only have I come up with the answer to all my psychological and physical ills, I think I could probably save the world. Everybody shut up and pay attention to me. That's the bit when, he started to go a bit much. But like I say, he was locked up on Ellis Island for about 2 months before the FBI realized they'd gotten confused with a guy called Wilhelm Reich who ran a communist bookshop in New Jersey. Not the first time he was going to be not entirely fairly imprisoned. And anyway, once in America, he started to formulate this theory. So he's trying to sort of combine all his various ideas into some kind of unified theory of everything, the way the scientists often try and do, but generally with a bit more basis than he did. He postulated that the universe was held together by something called orgone, which was this invisible sexual energy, like the force with a hard-on, that kind of thing. And then somehow this was running everything, and then we could only harness it and control it, then we could control matter itself. And he started to build these machines called orgone accumulators, like these sort of Faraday coffin sort of phone boxes that you would shut yourself in, and this would sort of leach all the orgone out of the universe and pump it straight into you and make you a better person. They became quite fashionable, apparently, in the 50s. Apparently, movie stars started buying them and everything. And I think you can definitely kind of see the roots of L. Ron Hubbard and his engrams and his E-meter there, you know what I mean? Fairly sure L. Ron Hubbard was taking notes around about this point. But anyway, this is the stuff which started to get really dangerous. This is the stuff which started to get him into trouble, this orgone theory, orgonomics, the thing. Because he also, he worked on what was it called? Vegetotherapy, right? Was another thing he was developing. He came up with this theory of muscular armor. Again, it's a similar kind of idea. You find these ideas around the fringes of early kind of analysis and therapy, both pre and post-Freudian. You had this idea that somehow all your anxieties and all your mental ills would actually start to manifest themselves in physical rigidity, that they would actually harden you physically, and that a way to combat this was through vigorous massage. You're always in trouble the minute a therapist finds a really good reason to get his hands on his patients. you know you're barking up a bit of a wrong tree there. And so this was something which he combined with his theory of orgonomics and started establishing these kind of orgone clinics where people would go and be vigorously rubbed by disciples of Wilhelm Reich in order to, release their orgone and make them into better people. And this, as you can imagine, started to raise a bit of trouble. One of the first sort of serious objections to him was an article written by a woman called Mildred Brady. Wrote an expose of him in the New Republic called The Strange Case of Wilhelm Reich. Weirdly, she wasn't specifically after him. Mildred Brady was kind of skeptical and indeed quite hostile to the whole field of psychoanalysis in general. She was actually, in much the same way the Scientologists would in due course adopt psychiatry as their great Satan, largely because, let's face it, it's a rival product. But she had this being upon it that psychoanalysis was this entirely invalid quack field and that Wilhelm Reich was just the most extreme manifestation of this rather than some kind of branch all to himself. And she wrote this expose of him which caused a lot of concern because it became apparent that in some of these orgone clinics people were coming out not just bruised but feeling actually got violated and possibly sexually violated by these people who were being employed by Reich to vigorously rub them. And also they had kids clinics. So you see the whole thing immediately starts to get a bit toxic. Exactly. So anyway, there was also around these clinics were closed down by court order. And in fact, all the machines, all the orgone accumulators, they were impounded and destroyed by federal court order. And all his books about orgone theory were impounded and burnt by the United States government. But with typical zeal, they also managed to impound and burn all the books he'd written before. So basically, pretty much all his works were destroyed and removed. And that's why you only encounter him by accident these days. He was pretty much deliberately erased from history. But one of the last things he did in his life was he tried to adapt his technology to the field of weather control. As he got more and more eccentric and more persecuted, he bought himself a ranch, which he called Organon, after his fictitious thing. If that's ringing a fake bell, it's going to ring a louder bell in a minute. And he tried to devote this technology towards weather control. And he built this rain-making device, which apparently was, you took one of his orgone accumulators and reversed the polarity of the neutron flow, and it did the whole thing backwards. The idea being that rather than sort of leach orgone out of the environment, it would pump it into the air, and that you could actually stimulate, rainfall from clouds. And he was hired by these blueberry farmers to tow one of these things into the field, and he fired it up, and apparently it did start raining. Almost certainly complete bloody coincidence, but enough for the blueberry farmers to be impressed, and also for his, at the time, 12-year-old son, Peter Reich, to be very sort of struck by this incident, of him to write it up in due course. Now, this is ringing a faint bell. It's because it's the basis for Cloud Busting by Kate Bush. Yeah, remember the video for Cloud Busting? Little boy and her cuddly mad scientist dad, played by Donald Sutherland, fire up the rainmaking machine in the field and he gets carted off by the sinister government agents. That's what was inspired by this. It's inspired by Peter Reich's memoirs. Now, let's say Wilhelm Reich was not your cuddly sort of Doc Brownish mad scientist as portrayed by Donald Sutherland. He was something altogether more fucked up. But that's what that song was actually inspired by. Because shortly after that, somebody who still had one of his orgone accumulators transported it across a state line. And this violated the terms of the injunction by which all the orgone accumulators had been compounded in the first place. And it placed Wilhelm Reich himself in contempt of court. And he was arrested. He was only being held pending trial. But while he was in jail, he died of heart failure. And that's kind of the end of his story, I suppose. But like I say, I'm not here to rehabilitate him. By today's standards, he would at least be regarded as somebody who was sexually exploitative, if not an out-and-out abuser. Like I say, he had multiple kinds of affairs with his patients. He was married 4 times. At least 3 of them were patients he was carrying on with while they were still his patients, which certainly today would violate every kind of ethical code. But of course, this is it. One of the weird things you discover about the early days of analysis, certainly the immediately pre-Freudian stuff, is a lot of it was bound up in kind of sexual ignorance. There were all these sort of pelvic massage therapists popping up in the 19th century, trying to cure women's hysteria because, people were brought up in such sexual ignorance that particularly middle-class women didn't actually know what orgasms were or that they were ever supposed to have one. And you read all these sort of glowing testimonials of, Dr. von Farnsman's cured my wife's hysteria. Yeah, he wanked her off. That's basically what he did. These women were paying good money to basically be wanked off by guys in white coats. So there was this sort of weird sort of crossover between, sexuality and analysis, and he was kind of as much a product of that, I think, as an avatar of it. But like I say, I'm not here to rehabilitate him. I'm just there because I think it's an interesting story that somebody who was not forgotten through kind of historical or cultural neglect, but somebody who was actually removed from history, possibly with good reason. Anyway, that's my nomination, Wilhelm Reich. There you go. Thank you.
So that leaves me to say thank you again to Mr. Mitch Benn. Do check out his Patreon page. That is patreon.com/Mitch Benn. He's also on Twitter and everywhere else. He is brilliant. Sing, dance, enjoy, and go see a show in Edinburgh. Doing it on purpose, like he did just then. What I am not doing on purpose is being irregular with the podcast. I'm hoping that life will settle down a little bit soon. My goodness, everything has been happening. Everything, like all at once. It's been brilliant. And you guys have suffered for it. But thank you to everybody who is still donating via PayPal. It's very kind. Every single donation is much obliged and cared for, as is every single tweet, every single Facebook message, every single share of the content. It makes me happy. I do actually see it myself quite a lot, and it just makes me feel that I'm not, speaking into the ether. Although ether was the substance that they thought space was made out of in Victorian times. I don't think that had molecules. I say molecules because I used to read science before I heard the word molecule. Anyway, we should go to bed now because it is late, shouldn't we? Or maybe you should just go to work or get off the exercise bike. Oh, carry on jogging. I will see you, hopefully, soon. I'm like Aslan. I call all time soon. You've been listening to the Z-List Deadlist podcast with me, Izzy Lawrence. To support the show, please share this episode with your friends, family, and on social media. You can also donate via PayPal. Just check out izzy.com. That is ISZI.com.
The solutions to all of your problems, Wilhelm has them. He says that all you need is a more powerful orgasm. The human race depends on its orgastic potency. So the harder you come, the better you'll be. Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like? Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like? He came up with a theory of everything on his own. He said the universe is bound by energy called orgone, which can not only cure cancer but end wars and change the weather. Suffice to say that by the end his shit was not together. Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like? Wilhelm Reich, what do you like? What do you like?